Welcome to XYPN Radio, where your host Alan Moore brings you into a community of fee-only financial planners who want to profitably and successfully serve Gen X and Gen Y clients. If you're ready to get the knowledge you need from leaders in your field, learn from forward-thinking advisors, and take action on your own goals, XYPN Radio is the show for you. Here's your host.
Hello and welcome to this episode of XYPN Radio. I'm your host, Alan Moore, and I'm excited to have my XYPN co-founder, Michael Kitces, back on the show today for an Alan and Kitces Unhinged mailbag episode. Despite promising early on in the episode to try to get to 8 questions today, which would be a major record, we answered 4 questions from listeners. So those questions include how to sell the value of financial planning to prospective clients. This ended up dovetailing into some thoughts on pricing as well. Our thoughts on whether an advisor can remain a fiduciary leveraging a fee offset model where commissions from the sale of insurance products are used to offset financial planning fees. How to avoid data overload and the impostor syndrome, trying to do everything Kitces says advisors should be doing on the Kitces.com blog. This was a really fun discussion. And finally, how many clients advisors should take on per month and why it's important to limit the number of new clients. As always, this episode will be a ton of fun and hopefully educational for our listeners. Missed calls or missed opportunities. Don't miss the chance to connect or bring on a new client. With Ruby, all your calls are answered live by a team of friendly, professional, remote receptionists, helping you win more clients and build trust. Let Ruby help you turn rings into relationships. For a special offer, visit callruby.com/XYPN and use promo code XYPN or call them at 1-844-853-7829. You can find any of the additional resources that we mentioned during the episode at xyplanningnetwork.com/143. Also, be sure to go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to join our private group just for XYPN Radio listeners. It's the community of advisors we've all been looking for that's there to provide support when we need it the most. Best of all, it's free. I encourage you to check it out. Again, that's xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP. Without further ado, here is the episode with Michael. Hey, Michael, welcome back to the show, man. Thanks so much for coming on.
It's good to be back in a relatively finite time. Like, it's only been a couple of weeks. I feel like we're getting back into the regular flow of things again. I had a couple of long gaps there for a while, so I'm
Yeah, we did. We used to do them like every single month. We would do one of these mailbag episodes, and then we fell off, and now we're loosely back. I got fussed at the other day. We had Mary Beth Storjahan and her husband Brian on the show a couple episodes ago, and she fussed at me for still being the one that schedules my own podcast. And so anyway, so we're hiring someone at XYPN Network that will take some of this off of my plate. So that'll be one of the tasks, is get Kitces scheduled once a month so we can get back into a better rhythm, and then it will actually happen.
That's a good strategy because, frankly, I'm still guilty of scheduling my own podcasts on my end as well. Maybe I should be hiring someone to do that as well. I have to admit, like, it's a funny thing to me that, I'll pound the table as much as anyone does about the importance of delegating and finding your highest and best uses and not getting bogged down in certain minutia items of your business that realistically you can delegate. But I'll admit, for me, like, the one thing that I have just struggled the most to actually let go of is control of my calendar, like actual control of my calendar. So I schedule all my events, I schedule all my consulting calls, I schedule all my podcasts. Like, I do all that stuff myself. I'm just, whatever it is, like, I can delegate almost anything in my business except the direct control of my time. And I know a lot of people that run some very successful businesses that pound the table that eventually you have to do that. And I know a lot of advisors that do that. Just their team schedules their client meetings, and client meetings just show up on their calendar, and they get told where they have to be because, frankly, otherwise it takes a lot of time to schedule all those meetings. But I guess, like, my own weakness in delegating, like, I've let go of a whole lot of tasks over the business, and I've learned to get better at that. I cannot let go of control of my time, though.
It's a good point. I mean, I have not done that, either. I've looked at, some of the various, outsourced virtual assistant companies and have never adopted one. I imagine at some point we'll have someone at XY that just takes it from me. But it is an interesting piece. But all right, so we got 14 questions that came in. I can assure questions 7 through 14. We're sorry.
I was going to say, it's not looking good for the second half of that list.
Yeah, I recently did an AMA or an Ask Me Anything, and I believe I got through 40 questions in 75 minutes. So I have proven that you can answer a lot of questions. However,
well, you've proven that you can answer a lot of questions. Unfortunately, you have me joining you on the show. So, and we only have like an hour. So clearly this is going to cap out at about 5 or 6 questions. But yeah, I'm happy to give it a shot. Let's see if maybe we can get to maybe. I was just going to say maybe we can get to like the 8th. I feel like that would be an accomplishment relative. I don't think we've gotten through 8 questions on any other mailbag episode.
No, I don't think we've ever passed 5. So I think 6 would be a record. So we'll see. Sometimes I think I'm leading off with some shorter ones just to get us going, but they can take just as long as others. So we'll dive right in. And just so that everyone knows, the where we grab these and get these questions from is from our VIP group. So if you listen to the podcast regularly, you know the link, xyplannetwork.com/VIP. You can get in that private Facebook group. And I post there, once a month or so and get questions. And actually, a lot of times these questions get answers from other advisors that are members of the group as well before we're able to get them on the show. So, please join and you can get in there and be able to ask questions. So, all right, jumping in. Question number 1, how to sell the value of financial planning to prospects. To set the stage for this is something obviously we have a lot of conversations around is how do you sell financial planning? And I think it's important to note sort of where we came from. And that is, we came from selling insurance, which was like a product everyone needed, or a stock because people wanted to invest, and that was what we sold. And then we sort of shifted, thanks to technology, we've shifted into being investment advisors, and we were charging a percentage of assets, which also meant we needed to do something. And at that time, we really all believed that we needed to be doing something to earn our fees. So we were all active managers, right? We either were actively trading stocks, we were actively selling in and out of mutual funds, based on the manager and their performance and all of that. And it was sort of the sales pitch was easy. For insurance, you're going to die and your family's going to have no money. You need insurance. It's a real easy sell. Yeah. You need to save for retirement. Here's, buy these stocks. Look at all this stuff that I did and how we're going to beat the market. We're going to give you upside gains with no downside risk, which is a lie, but you can sell that, right? And you could sell active investment management. We've, slowly, and now we're sort of arrived at this point where now we're selling financial planning, which is just a different sales mindset. And what a lot of advisors do is they're reaching for but look at everything that I do, which makes it hard to sell financial planning. So I guess, how do you frame the value of financial planning to a prospect or to somebody who's interested in learning more about financial planning?
So first of all, I feel compelled to point out to all the listeners that like Alan truly he reads this, like he pulls these questions straight from the VIP group and he doesn't tell me what they are in advance. So I had no idea that this was going to be a setup that on the very first question out of the gate, we were going to have to play the niche market drinking game.
It's already started.
Because that's where we're going here. And before, a few people probably start rolling their eyes around this, so in all seriousness, I think you framed it well, Alan, that the early days roots, we sold products. And I mean, that was literally how I started my career. Not well, because I was horrible at it. But, I sold life insurance. I got trained on how variable universal life worked. And then I sold features and benefits of my product. Features and benefits. That's just what you get hammered into you in sales training classes in the life insurance world. And we evolved away from that for a while in the industry. We went a bit more investment centric, and then we didn't, it was great. Like we didn't have to sell products, features, and benefits because we could sell alpha and beta, right? I mean, we were selling investment performance or relative investment performance or ability to outperform, or at least minimizing the ability to underperform, right? I will close the behavior gap for you is still at the end of the day, a pitch of I will deliver you better investment results than you would have gotten on your own. I may not beat an index, but I'll at least beat how you would have mismanaged the index. But it's still we went from selling products to selling performance. And now all of a sudden we're in this world where we're trying to sell advice. In practice, I think this kind of boils down in a couple of different ways, depending on how you frame yourself and your advisory firm. The truth to a large extent is that, particularly when you're a solo advisor, like your clients aren't even just really buying the value of financial planning. They're buying you. I mean, they're buying you, their trust in you, their belief that you're credible, their belief that you can solve problems that they've got. And as long as they believe they have problems and that you can solve them, they buy the services from you. And we've got a bunch of studies out there about the value of financial planning. I've published some of this stuff on Nerd's Eye View around, and we did a whole white paper on it around the value add of closing the behavior gap, and the value add of tax advice, and the value add of estate planning advice, and all this different stuff. But honestly, like even going through this with clients at our advisory firm, like I don't think deep down that's why clients buy us, or at least not in any framing like that. What it really comes down to is they buy us, they buy their trust in us, they buy our expertise and the belief that we're able to solve their problems. And the value ends up being in the eye of the beholder. This is why you can have two advisors that provide substantively the same service. One charges $150 an hour and the other charges $1,000 an hour. And the reason why the advisor charging $1,000 an hour is able to charge $1,000 an hour is because they work with extremely high income executives who make $2,000 an hour. So technically, if they pay that advisor $1,000 an hour, they're making money every time they delegate something at $1,000 an hour. And you get this effect where the value of your services is really not about your cost to deliver the service plus some profit margin. Your value is in the eye of the beholder and the person who's receiving it and what it's worth for them, including both hard dollar value of things like tax strategies and a lot of the intangible values of, truly kind of peace of mind and trust in that you're going to get them to better a place. But the point to all this and kind of why I set this up at the beginning in the context of our wonderful, Kitces just talks about niches all the time, is once you actually boil this down to something more specific that you do, a more concrete target market and a more specific expertise, the whole nature of this begins to change because the value that you provide becomes incredibly specific to the particular people that you serve, and you can frame that value to them because you know exactly what their problems are when you serve them and work with them. So, when we go through this, like even for our advisory firm at Pinnacle Advisory Group, we work predominantly with retirees in our advisory firm. We're a fairly traditional practice in that regards, but having spent a couple of decades working with retirees, we're really good at understanding the stress and pain points of retirees. And so we're talking about how we're going to help you figure out all those Social Security timing decisions. And we're going to help you figure out, the timing of your Medicare when all those letters just start showing up 3 months before you turn 65 and you have no idea what you're supposed to do. And we'll help you make that decision about the pension or the lump sum. And we'll help you figure out whether you really do have enough money to retire and be able to sleep at night. And we just start going through things that I know are high stress problems that are on the minds of our prospects, because I've worked with enough of these people and their concerns are really quite consistent if you're always talking to people that are queuing up a retirement transition. And once you start going down that road, you end out with a value of financial planning advice that is incredibly specific to your target clientele. And it actually gets easier to explain the value of what you do because you can come up with a list of value benefits that are consistent and the same for every single client. I know that I can swing $50,000 to $100,000 of increased value by helping someone make a good Social Security timing decision. That's a great thing to talk about with our prospects because every single one of them has to make that decision. If we were a generalized firm that just worked with anyone that came in the door, that would be a really dumb thing to put on our website because it, by definition, doesn't apply to like 80 or 90% of the population that's not within a year or two of that decision. But it applies to almost 100% of our prospects. And so the more specific you can get with who it is you're trying to target and reach, you'll find the easier it is to start articulating whatever the value is. And, if you work with tech entrepreneurs, your value of, quote, financial planning is going to be completely different than if you work with young lawyers trying to make partner, which is going to be completely different than if you work with pharmacists. That is going to be completely different than if you work with bass fishermen who are negotiating endorsement deals, because there's actually an advisor out there who does that. The more specific the people you're serving, the more specific you can actually craft and identify what the value of financial planning is for those particular people. And that becomes the most compelling version of describing the value of financial planning.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree that it's so much easier to define the value of financial planning whenever you know who you work with, right? The value of financial planning is going to be different than everyone, but or it's going to be different for each person or sort of each niche market. But I do wonder about, like, we sort of get in this mindset of selling what we do instead of selling what we help our clients do. And so, I think back to, start with why with, Simon Sinek and asking people, why are you here? Well, I want to make a good decision about Social Security. Well, why? Or I want to be able to retire. I want to be able to travel. Like, what are the things that you're kind of trying to accomplish? And if you keep asking why, eventually pretty much everyone says the same thing. Like, they just want to be happy. And isn't it an amazing thing that in financial planning, we are one of the few professions, maybe the only profession, that actually can drill down with a client and say, what is going to fulfill you in life? What's going to make you happy? And then be able to honestly say, we are here to help you achieve that.
Yeah. Well, and
whatever that is.
And there's a whole domain out there that I think really hasn't permeated very much into financial advisors yet around pricing. It's a concept called value-based pricing, and grossly oversimplifying what's actually some really interesting pricing theory. It basically comes down to this idea that, if you really want to know what the value of your service is, you have to get out of the mindset of, well, the value of my service is, whatever I need to earn to make it work, right? There's a lot of advisors I know that, they say, like, I charge $150 an hour because I figured out, I want to make $150,000 of gross revenue, and I can only bill about half my time through the year because I've got other business stuff. So if I'm only going to work 1,000 hours that are billable and I want to generate $150,000 of revenue, my time is worth $150 an hour. And so, that's the value of the planning services I provide. And then basically they try to figure out what expertise they can cram into an hour to justify the $150 price point that they're trying to set. And the nature and essence of values-based pricing is to start at the other end. It's all about, if you could solve this problem, what is it worth to the person who's getting the problem solved, right? It goes back to famous stories like the expert carpenter who gets called out to fix a squeaky board because this guy's been trying to get it fixed for months, and he's called out 3 carpenters and no one can figure out what exactly to do. And he finally finds this brilliant genius of a carpenter who comes out, walks the floor back and forth for about a minute, figures out exactly where the squeak is, pulls out a nail, hammers one nail into the floor, correctly solves the squeak, and hands the guy an invoice for $200 for 2 minutes. And, the guy says, like, how can you bill me $200 for 2 minutes of work? And, the sort of famous saying is like, well, no, it was $1 for the nail and $199 for my lifetime of expertise to know where to hit it. But, you're going to pay it because you've been going nuts about this squeak for weeks with a whole bunch of different carpenters, and I solved your problem. So how much is it worth to you to not have to listen to this squeak anymore? And that path takes you down, like, all the way up to the realm of, like, you can charge $1,000 an hour for your time if you want, as long as you're working with people who value their time at least $2,000 an hour, because you will be cost efficient for them. And it's not about whether you, quote unquote, are worth $1,000 an hour or not. It's about whether your time is worth $1,000 an hour to the person that you're solving problems for. And I do think we have a tendency to try to figure out, like, what's the value of the stuff I'm pushing out rather than what's the value for the person who's receiving it, with the caveat that because value is in the eye of the beholder, the more consistent and clearly targeted your clientele are around some kind of niche or expertise or specialization, the easier it is to try to articulate exactly what that value is, because the eyes of the beholders become very consistent when you target the same type of clientele with everything that you do.
Yeah, and obviously a pricing conversation, whole other ball game here. I think, when it comes down to selling financial planning, I love the way Mitch Anthony frames it. So he was our keynote presenter at our last national conference, and he says, no one remembers what you said to them. They just remember how you made them feel. And that remember not to sell all the things that you do, because clients aren't going to remember that. What they're going to remember is how you helped them and that you said you were going to be able to help them and that you did. So if you want to learn how to sell and really sell real financial planning, I highly recommend. Our sales coach is Nancy Blakey with Sales Pro Insider. She's awesome. We've had her on the podcast in the past. Check out the Kinder, it's the Kinder Institute, the Kinder, Registered Life Planner, RLP designation. Also a fabulous, it's not a sales certification necessarily, but it's a model for doing financial planning. And I think once you can describe financial planning in the way that he describes it, or, go to some of Mitch Anthony's courses, once you can describe financial planning in the way that they do, selling financial planning is really easy, because he gets out of this, we're going to review your disability insurance. No, we're going to say, what do you want out of life? And then here's how we're going to help you achieve that goal.
Well, and one version of the way I like to frame this, I'll admit, I don't do this with a lot of our advisory firm clients, because again, we actually are a little bit more niche focused. So I usually know what their concerns are and why they're coming to us and what the situation is. I do this actually a little bit more with some of my consulting clients. But 3 questions for you to try the next few times you're sitting down with prospects and you're going through this mental process of trying to figure out how you explain or justify the value of financial planning. So first question is just to ask them, why are you here meeting with me today? And I find a lot of us, we tend not to ask that question. We presume we know why they came. And, I'll admit, even I just sort of acknowledge that I tend to do that in our firm, but it's only because we have really targeted marketing. But, just asking, why did they, what brought you here? And, people will say financial planning, or I got some financial questions, but I find you usually have to repeat this a couple of times. Why did you come here? Well, I'm hoping to retire soon. Well, okay, you've probably been thinking that for a while. Why did you come today? Well, I think I may be retiring sooner rather than later. Okay, well, why are you thinking you're going to retire sooner rather than later? Just keep asking the why question for a while until you get down to what's really on their mind. What really is the thing that's bothering them that made them actually pick today to come see you and not any of the other 364 days in the past year leading up to today. The second question, after you get through the why are you here meeting with me, is what would have to occur in this planning relationship for it to be a good outcome for you? And let them actually explain and define what that outcome would look like. Dan Sullivan
define success.
Yeah, Dan Sullivan from Strategic Coach has a version of this question as well, and I forget exactly how he frames it, but it's a similar framing of what would have to occur in this advisory relationship over the next 3 years for this to have been a good outcome, a good investment of your time and dollars, and let them define well, what is it? Okay, well, I need to have gotten to, through retirement and have made all these Social Security decisions and figured out Medicare. And I just want to be at a point where I'm living on a beach and sipping margaritas and not so stressed. Let them paint that picture of what has to occur in order for this to be a good outcome. And then the third question to ask them is, and what would that be worth to you? And let them put a price on the value of the good financial planning that you're about to give them, because they just told you why they're here, exactly what you have to do in order to give them a good outcome, and you're going to let them name the price of whatever it is. And frankly, I've used versions of this question a few times. Usually, no one literally comes down to achieving that vision would be worth $12,372 of financial planning fees. Frankly, once they get set up that way, they usually say something to the effect of, Well, yeah, I mean, that would be priceless. Like, I mean, this is what I want to achieve. Like, this is whatever it takes. Like,
it's whatever it
they
takes.
just spent all this time talking about their absolute dream of what they're trying to do and what they want to get to and exactly what you would have to do in order for it to be a good outcome. And so, when they answer some version of it would be priceless, you get to respond with, well, I've got some great news for you because it's only going to cost you a couple $1,000s in planning fees.
Yeah, it's funny to me that like you and I are on different ends of this because you're very focused on the pricing side of it, which is not a bad thing. That's not a criticism. It's just, you can approach this in several different ways, which I expect is what listeners are hearing here, which is a good thing, is, trying to, and you can go back to listen to the episodes that we've done with Carl Richards. You can listen to some of our folks on here that have, had a lot of success in how they frame it. There are many ways to learn how to sell financial planning. Now, that is not setting us up to get through 8 questions. I will tell you that.
That was not a good start on high volume questions.
All right. So next question, I'm going to paraphrase this because it was a super long question, but basically it's just a discussion around the fee offset model. So this comes from an advisor that said they used to be with a broker dealer, was disgusted with the commission driven business, and ultimately wanted to move into a conflict free relationship with clients. So they moved fee only. However, they're still doing a lot of insurance work because they have a background in that. And so they're doing super deep dives, really helping their clients understand what they need. And then, they're having someone else actually transact the product. So the question that this advisor asks is, I view it as my job and included in sort of protection planning analysis into my services and what I do. I don't expect to be paid for it. However, would rather see the commissions go to either A, the pocket of my client via a credit to future billing, which is what a fee offset is. So we can define that here in a second. Or B, that those commissions should come to me and then I can push those to a meaningful cause selected by the client or myself. So it goes on to say, I recognize XYPN is never going to allow this because it's impossible to police, but why can't fee offset or donating commissions to charity allow an advisor to remain a fiduciary? So let's define fee offset because some folks have made, and I've never worked in this model, but I'll try to define it and you tell me if I'm right, which is, I normally charge $5,000 a year for financial planning, and we do that on an ongoing basis. And then one time I sell you a term life insurance policy, I make $2,000. I credit that $2,000 commission back to your $5,000 plan. So this year you only pay me $3,000 because ultimately the most I'm going to make is $5,000. Is that a fair characterization?
Yep, that's a fair characterization. There's usually a little bit of question mark that comes up around basically, so what if the total commission's more than my entire fee? Like, are you gonna carry forward the like if I do a big enough insurance policy with you, like, do I just get free financial planning for the next 7 years, kind of thing? Which eventually does start introducing some other problems. But if you're in a world, I mean, particularly for who folks typically work with in the XYPN context, which are younger clients where this is probably mostly term insurance, where a couple of bucks are going to change hands, but like you're not going to swamp out your advisory fee in all likelihood with term insurance commissions. Yeah, that's basically the structure. Like, here's my planning fees. I'm going to offset, or even advisory fees. I'm going to offset my fees by any commissions that get earned and just bill you for the balance because the commission's built in and I got no way not to take it.
Yeah. So why can't you be a fiduciary and maintain a fee offset model or donate commissions? And I would say the answer is you can. I mean, I don't think either of us have ever said you can't. And so I would agree that if you are going to accept the commissions, leveraging a fee offset is the best way to go about that. Or like I said, if you want to donate the commissions, donate the trails, that sort of thing.
Yeah. I mean, the essence of meeting your fiduciary duty is being able to take steps that manage and mitigate conflicts of interest. A commission is a conflict of interest, as we and many have discussed. And yeah, I think both of those are very reasonable ways to mitigate the conflict of interest. I won't take the dollars because I'm going to pass them through to charity, or I'm going to apply them as an offset against other fees. Like I think those are very reasonable ways to meet a fiduciary duty. There's a couple parenthetical things, as I noted, of like, how are you going to handle really large commissions, and are you going to roll those forward? And if you roll those forward, at some point you can create other conflicts in the relationship, like, hey, when you basically just prepaid 7 years worth of financial planning fees for me for one really big commission, like, you're going to rebate the fees back if you don't do good work in the next 6 years, like, because regulators don't really like us billing that far in advance. So there's some complications that can come up in certain circumstances, but at a high level, like, yeah, I think it's an entirely reasonable way to handle a fiduciary duty, but it's not fee only.
Yeah, and this is a great example of where fee only and fiduciary are not always synonymous. And that is, historically, they kind of have been that if you were fee only, you were also fiduciary. However, there are ways to be a fiduciary without necessarily being fee only. And this is a great example. And that is, if you want to be able to provide this service to your clients and be able to, go deep and you just really want to be able to handle the transactions and you think that's what's best for your client, do it. You can't call yourself fee only according to the current definition of fee only by the CFP board. And I suspect any subsequent definition that will come, I don't think it will ever encompass this because to the point of the question asker, it's just so impossible to police. It would basically require an audit of your books every year to prove that you are doing what you say you're doing. And no one's interested in doing that. However, there's nothing wrong with it. I think that's a fine model.
Yeah, I'd really echo that. I mean, I think it makes a good case in point example that there are more ways to be a fiduciary and really like proactively manage conflicts of interest in order to be an effective fiduciary, besides solely literally being fee only and just eschewing all the commissions. I think it's a reasonable way to handle it. As Alan said, we do have a fee only line and not solely a fiduciary line around XY Planning Network, in part because this is very challenging for us to oversee, especially when we're looking at hundreds and at some point 1,000+ advisors. And so, we have to, in all seriousness, take into consideration issues like, how willing are we to have rogue advisors that are doing this improperly? And what's our ability to investigate our own advisors to analyze this versus just saying the most straightforward way for us to manage this conflict of interest is just not to permit it, as opposed to saying manage it. So that's the particular decision that we've made within XY Planning Network. Now, I'll admit at a high level, my hope is eventually that the stinking insurance companies solve this problem for us by just making doggone fee-only insurance policies so that we don't have to go through this process of getting a commission and then doing a fee offset. And, there are states that have rules limiting commission rebating that you have to be careful of here as well. And there's a whole bunch of other messy stuff because, frankly, the entire structure of insurance distribution through commissions to agents was not built for a world of fiduciary financial planning. So the whole industry is kind of struggling through its transition with this. I suspect this is a conversation that will rapidly decline over the next probably 5 to 7 years, because there are a lot of insurance companies right now that are trying to rebuild and retool fee-only annuity and insurance policies to meet this new, increasingly fiduciary world, because they're cognizant that while DOL's fiduciary rule doesn't outright ban insurance commissions and investment commissions, the Australian version of fiduciary did ban all investment commissions. The UK version of fiduciary banned all investment commissions. The Netherlands version of fiduciary banned all investment commissions. And the South African version of fiduciary banned all investment commissions, all of which have happened in the past 4 years. So there's a non-trivial amount of precedent that at some point down the road, more fiduciary rules are just likely to keep winding down commissions. And it doesn't mean that people don't need all these products. It's the same transition of going from commission-based mutual funds to just using fund companies like Vanguard and DFA, which technically are not even necessarily cheaper for the client once we add our advisory fee around it. But you are seeing companies retool from I get paid a 1% 12B13 fee on a C share to I use an ETF that costs 3 basis points and then wrap my 1% fee around it, because we may have the same cost and provide the same service, but we're just moving away from a commission-based compensation system into a fee-based compensation system. And then we'll see over time which one is cheaper and how and for what clients.
Yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see, especially with some of the states, potentially implementing their own fiduciary rules. I believe Montana is actually one of those, XYPN's home state. I believe we are involved in a maybe we're involved in a lawsuit around it. Maybe it's not actually that we're implementing one, but for all 10 are.
Well, and our Pinnacles advisory firm is in Maryland. Maryland just introduced a legislation to do a fiduciary rule for all brokers in the state. It's still in proposal form, so we'll see if it even makes it through the state legislature. But Maryland's proposed it, New York's proposed it, New Jersey's proposed it, Nevada passed a version of the law, Connecticut passed a version of the law. Like, the states are taking it up because DOL is being delayed. The SEC is taking it up because they're freaking out that states are taking it up, and so they want a federal version before there's 50 different versions, one state at a time. So, like, fiduciaries come in. Commissions may or may not be banned on the next round, but certainly the messy wind down of commissions is, I think, underway across the industry. And it doesn't mean we don't have to charge for our services or get to charge for our services. It just means that in the next couple of years, you're going to see a lot more commission-free products that make it easier for you to just charge for your advice, whatever you're going to charge, and be able to implement a lower cost insurance or annuity solution with clients because you're already getting paid outside, so you don't need a commission-based policy as well. And you will see more of that in the next few years.
Yeah, it'll certainly be interesting. So my dad sells police cars, but he's done a lot of alternative fuel vehicles over the years. And quite honestly, the entire alternative fuel marketplace is driven by the state of California because they make requirements and they say all vehicles coming into the state must have X number of miles per gallon. And so then Ford, GM, they all have to build for California because you're not going to build a different vehicle, but it's the largest buying state of vehicles. And so all it's going to take is California or a Maryland. One of these states implements a hardcore fiduciary rule and it's going to get...
Yeah. One, and we have similar dynamics in financial service industry. A lot of investment law tends to start in New York as well as Massachusetts. Massachusetts is well known to be one of the most aggressive investment regulators. And they're the ones that just sued Scottrade for violations of DOL fiduciary. New York is also the one that originates most state insurance laws. The momentum tends to build there first. And New York's the one that proposed a fiduciary duty for insurance agents in New York. So, the states that tend to lead the charge in our industry are the ones that are already actively leading the charge. And again, part of that's just to make the point, fiduciaries come in. If it's not DOL fiduciary, it's going to happen some other way. It's a global phenomenon. But the secondary point in this context is you are going to see an explosion of no-load, high-quality insurance products coming out over the next couple of years because insurance companies have very, very long-term time horizons, right? They write policies that might not pay for 50 to 100 years. So everything they do is long-term oriented. And they are really aware right now that their future may not involve commissions. And people still need insurance, and you won't get to use commissions anymore. So they're all trying to figure out how they reinvent themselves to reach advisors in a fee-oriented fiduciary future.
All right. Next question. I'm interested to hear the answer on this one. So, how to avoid data overload and imposter syndrome when following and comparing oneself to Michael Kitces? Step one, don't compare yourself to Michael Kitces. I've started avoiding the Kitces podcast and the Kitces report, sort of Kitces.com material, even though I'm a paid subscriber because I can't possibly do everything he wants me to do. It feels like we're married and he is judging me. Welcome to my world. You aren't even business partners with Michael. No, it's a great question because
It's a fantastic question.
You're a content machine. And so basically putting out 5+ pieces of in-depth content a week. So do you expect advisors to be able to keep up with everything that you're putting out there and following all of your recommendations?
No, I don't. And frankly, I don't for a couple of reasons. The first, getting back to, once again, the topic du jour, I write about a ridiculously wide range of stuff. if you are doing all of the different things that I write about, your target market is ridiculously wide, far, far too wide, and you need to stop trying to be everything to everyone, because not everybody possibly needs all the different things that I write about. So, again, like, just trying to reinforce the more targeted, I'll put it this way, the more targeted you are, the more you can sleep well at night while ignoring like 90% of my articles that won't apply to you. Now, we all have different target markets. We all have different folks we work with. We deliberately have a wide breadth of content on Kitces.com because from our end, I want to make sure we're adding value to advisors across a wide range of niches. And so, we try to be cognizant of quite how wide we're going and how wide we're not going. I don't write articles for insurance agents unless they happen to be moving towards financial planning. I don't write articles for broker dealers. I don't write articles for the banking world. I'm very focused on fiduciary financial planners that aspire to do better for their clients. That's who we try to produce content for. So you shouldn't even be trying to keep up with all of it. I'm glad that you read every subject line that comes through on the emails. We try to make the subject lines as crystal clear as possible so you know exactly what's in there. And if you're still not sure, we write that whole executive summary in each email so that you can see and filter, is this article actually relevant for me in my practice? And it's okay to say, no, this one's not, or no, this week's article is not, and move on. Whether it's the information you get from me or other social media channels or the newspaper or however it is that you go out there and take in and get information, like, the world will always throw more information at you than you can possibly consume. So you need to set filters for yourself. And, I'm wonderfully appreciative for all the advisors out there that, are apparently so enjoying the content that they really feel compelled to try to consume as much of it as possible, but consume as much of it as possible that is likely relevant for the business you're actually running. And it's okay to skip some of the rest. You don't have to try to learn everything about all the things that don't actually pertain to what you do in your business. Keep focus on what you're working on. That's part of building good information filters for yourself, is being able to parse out what matters that you need to spend time on and what just doesn't matter for you, even though it may be a great thing for someone else.
Yeah. So, and I totally agree. I'm an avid listener of books, and I used to work for someone who, or work with someone that was an avid reader. And we all lived in fear of the book that they were reading at the time, because if they were reading,
then they're going to come home with ideas.
Well, and so if they were reading Checklist Manifesto, like, everything for the next 2 or 3 weeks was going to be about Checklist Manifesto. And then they'd start reading Delivering Happiness. And suddenly we wouldn't talk about checklists anymore. Now we were talking about just customer service. And then another book would get picked up and we dropped the customer service thing. And we always just lived in fear. And I think a lot of entrepreneurial CEOs do this, across the span of startups all the way up. And what I have learned for myself, because I can do this as well, is I think honestly, it is part of my ADD, is that, I get into something and I get really into something and sort of block out everything else. And one thing I try to practice is that when I read a book, I try to take one key takeaway away from it. So when I read a book, I'm getting hundreds of takeaways and things that are influencing decisions that I make and the way I communicate things and things I'm thinking about. But like, there's one thing that I walk away from and say, okay, that's the thing I'm going to implement. And that is how I would treat the Kitces.com content. I think you can put it in a couple different buckets, right? The podcast is, interviews with successful advisors. Listen to their stories, because the best way to shortcut success is to listen to how others did it and copy them. Okay. You're not breaking ground and doing anything new. Just do what other successful people have done, and you will find success. It's a really clean formula. There's also the CE content that goes on Kitces on Wednesdays is CE content, I believe.
Yep. Wednesdays is CE content.
Read the abstract, the executive summary, and then maybe read the comments. No, just read the abstract so you know what's there, because the truth is a lot of your in-depth content is extremely useful in one-off scenarios. Now, if it's like, hey, new tax bill, great. Yeah, read every freaking word of the new tax bill. Yeah. But please. Trust is the beneficiary of an IRA. Like, come back to that when you run into that situation. You don't need to remember all the crazy tax laws that come with that. So just sort of know that's there. The practice management content, I think, is where people are going to get hung up because you do put out a lot. I mean, we put out a lot, you leveraging all the podcasts and the blogs. There's a lot of content out there. And again, I think it's really prioritizing what you need to be focused on because you can always be doing everything or trying to do everything, right? And if you try to do everything, you'll do nothing. So picking out the thing you want to be focused on, really dig into that because everyone is in a different place. And so some people need to be looking at time management. Some people need to be looking at hiring and outsourcing. Some people need to be thinking about their financial planning process. Some need to freaking take a day off and, go on a vacation. So wherever you're at, to your point, filter down the content that matters to you because there is always going to be more content that you could possibly consume. I mean, what YouTube like every day is putting like more than a lifetime's worth of videos up. Like you can't possibly go watch every video on YouTube. Don't feel like you have to. Just watch the videos you care about.
Now, the one other part of this that I want to circle back to as well. So, I mean, I think there's one takeaway you have from this. It's just to acknowledge like, it's okay to filter stuff. Again, like I don't write clickbaity headlines. I write headlines that just actually say exactly what the freaking article is about. And we write as clear as we can, like clear executive summary descriptions of what the article is about to try to help people understand what the content is and whether you want to spend your chunk of time today or this week going through this article or saying, you know what, this just isn't quite the right thing for me right now. And depending on how you like to do it, you can save it to an Evernote or for later or something if you want to, capture it and save it in case you really are interested in coming back to it at some point down the road. But it's okay to filter content. You have to, and not just my stuff, just the world throws a lot of things at you. You gotta filter it or you're just going to drown in the information and then never get around to doing anything with it. But the second thing I want to touch on was there was a second part of that comment around like imposter syndrome and the challenges of comparing oneself. And, I feel like this to me is the equivalent, and I don't mean this in like a negative pejorative way to put down the person who asked this, but like to me, this is the equivalent of a 22-year-old who goes up to a retiree and says, oh my God, it's impossible to ever accumulate like $1 million for retirement. I've got $37 in my bank account. And it's because when you got $37 in your bank account and a whole bunch of student loans overhanging you, the idea of someday having $1 million just feels like fantastically, ridiculously absurd. Never mind the fact that like you realize the person you're talking to spent 40 years getting to that point. It's not like they just did a thing on their 23rd birthday and then a year later they were a millionaire too. Like they built there over a ridiculously long period of compounding. And if you just look at what someone has at the end of a compounding cycle and compare it to yourself at the beginning of a compounding cycle, yeah, it's not going to feel great. It may even feel just outright unattainable. But, if you want to know what that looks like the first thing you should do is ask that, 65-year-old retiree who accumulated the $1 million, like, so what was it like when you were my age, when you were at my stage, when you were at my point in the career? And then you start getting some perspective, like if you really want to do the comparison thing. So, if you want to go down that road, like God bless, when I first set up the site, for Kitces.com, I installed Google Analytics from the start. So I have one continuous data set going back about 10 years. We launched in 2008. So, I mean, I can go back to 2008 and actually see what that looked like. So, if anyone's curious, like in 2008, Nerd's Eye View had an average of 32 visitors a day. One person an hour came by, and most of them were friends and people I already knew because I was like telling my friends to come read the thing that I made. And some of them were nice enough to show up more than once a week. And that was the majority of my traffic, like 32 people a day. I literally had more people come to the blog every weekday last week than I did in the entire first cumulative year running the site. That's the difference between looking where someone is 10 years after compounding, which is where we've grown to with compounding, versus what it's actually like getting started. So, if you can get to a point where after making your website for a year, if you can get to more than 32 people a day who come to your website, you're beating what I managed to do in the first year. And that's frankly not such an unattainable goal. Even when I look the next year, like the following year, we averaged 50 people a day. It didn't even go up that much. It felt amazing to go from 25 to 50, but like it was only 50. It takes a really, really long time for compounding growth to do its thing. Now we're at a point where the compounding, frankly, has taken hold. So, our readership grew more last year than it did in the first 6 years cumulatively, because that's what happens after compounding growth. But the first few years getting started, like hardly anyone was showing up the same way it is for everyone who gets started.
Well, and all great points around the beauty of compounding, right? And the power of it, and why you start small and you stay consistent and you keep doing it, and over time, you will benefit it. However, comparing yourself to anyone else is just, it's never an equal comparison. It's never apples to apples. The truth is, I've never met anyone that wants to be Michael Kitces. I've met people who say, I want to be the next Michael Kitces. But if I ask them, do you want to go to 80 conferences a year? Do you want to be involved in this many different companies, or write this much content, or, not take vacations very often? Like, are you, it's like, no. Like, I want my lifestyle. Like, I want to be able to work, 40 hours a week. Well, then you don't get to be Michael Kitces. And that's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's just a thing, right? And that's okay.
I haven't worked 40 hours a week since college.
Which
I worked less than that in college. I didn't work very hard.
I don't necessarily encourage that path. However, like, I don't want to be Michael Kitces either, right? Like, so and that's okay. So try to never let yourself compare yourself to others, because one, you only see, it's that iceberg mentality, right? You only see the 10% success. You don't see the 90% of work that went into it. And the truth is, you only see the 10% we want you to see. And so you don't see the late nights. Like, we're recording this at 9 p.m. here and 11 p.m. Eastern on a Saturday night right now, because our kids are in bed and this is when we can make this happen. So, like, do you want to be recording podcasts at 9 p.m. at night? Probably not.
On a just to be clear, on a Saturday night. Alan is my date right now.
We do more dates with each other on the weekends than we do with our spouses, virtually, of course. But and so anyway, that is not a humble brag by any stretch. There are days where I wish I could do this at 2 p.m. on a Thursday. It doesn't work out for our schedules. But yeah, just always one. I think there's two parts to this. One, try to filter down and pay attention to the content that matters most to you. And two, just recognize that your success will be your success, and you can never, ever compare success with anybody else's.
And at a minimum, if you really want to go down this comparison road, like, compare to people who are at a similar stage to where you are and what it looks like then. Again, like our first year, 32 people a day, most of whom I just knew personally, like, and they were, coming back regularly because I asked them to. Like, it starts small for everyone.
This is really why you should have a study group of peers, because then it actually gives you an appropriate benchmark to sort of base yourself on and be able to drive you towards appropriate levels of success. All right, probably going to be our final question, but also a very one I'm excited to talk through. So, how to determine how many new clients you should take on per month? I know you can't just say 2 or 3, but how do you go about determining the right number? This is a huge struggle for me right now, as the insecure me says, take on all the newcomers and everyone that you can find. But the realistic me knows that you can't take on more than maybe 2, maybe 3 a month if you want to stay sane and still provide good service. And says, this is a totally selfish request, as I just need to hear more discussion about it. And there were some comments about this one in the Facebook group, which I think we're all respectful, just sort of friendly jabs, but good problem to have. But it is a problem in that too much growth can be just as much of a problem as not enough growth. They have their own pros and cons that we have to talk through. So is there a rule of thumb that you've found on number of clients an advisor can take on per month, let's say in their first couple of years of business where they're still in like new client mode?
Good question. So I'm always a little wary to give a rule of thumb around this, just truly for all the reasons that you just said. But I think from a practical perspective, something like 2 or 3, something right in that range of 2 or 3 new clients a month, I think really is a very reasonable cap. Frankly, I think 2 a month is a very reasonable cap. And the reason is just, as we all know, like the process of going through financial planning with clients is so intensive. In the first few months, there's lots of phone calls, there's lots of emails. You've got a lot of actual grinding work to do on those financial plans and whatever it is you're delivering to them. You have a whole slew of meetings that frankly take multiple months. So, if you're taking 3 a month, you actually probably have 9 to 12 initial financial plans open at any particular time, because it typically takes most advisors a couple of months just to get all the way through the initial planning process of whatever it is that they do. And trying to juggle like 9 to 12 new financial plans on top of everything else in your business and all the existing clients and their needs and the update meetings and review meetings and whatever else you're doing, like it gets really crazy really fast. As many folks have heard me talk about on the podcast before, when we look at even just the industry benchmarking numbers, most people start capping out somewhere between about 75 to 100 clients. Maybe you can get a little over 100 if you've got a paraplanner to support you. Most people actually start looking at hiring a paraplanner as they approach kind of the 50 to 75 client range. But even though a lot of advisors can get to maybe 50 to 75 clients on their own with ongoing financial planning and 75 to 100 plus with some staff support, that doesn't necessarily mean you can do them all at once, right? Like those are clients when you're only seeing them a few times a year and you're handling the intra-meeting emails and phone calls and stuff that crops up, but you're not doing a full-on comprehensive financial plan for all of these people all at once as they are going through that onboarding bottleneck. And so just, in a world where it might take you a week or 2 of intensive effort cumulatively to get through a new financial plan for someone, just if you string all the pieces together and crunched it down. I think a lot of advisors you're going to find if you're doing more than 2 new clients a month, it's going to start feeling stressful, at least if like they're full scale clients. You can do like standalone 1-hour engagements for new people, but like full scale planning clients. I think 2 a month is probably a reasonable pace. 3 a month probably gets stressful. And for almost anyone doing a full financial planning process and going more than 3 a month, like if that sustains, I'd be really worried you're just going to burn yourself out.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard of advisors trying to do 1 a week, which, if an average plan takes you 15 to 20 hours, just depending on your planning process, that upfront plan can take a while. Like it's intense. And the danger that you run into, I remember talking with Kristen Harrod, who is an awesome marketing coach. She talked about that she suffered from this in her business where she would go out and do a lot of marketing to advisors. She'd get a ton of business that sucked up all of her time. So then she was just doing marketing work for advisors. And then eventually she ran out of new business. And then she went out and did marketing because she needed more business. And you get into this cycle where you're either doing business development and then you're doing the work, and then you're doing business development, and then you're doing the work. And it's actually, it's very challenging because you feel like you're always drowning. You're either drowning or starving.
Yeah. It's a very feast and famine kind of cycle.
It is. It's a tough balance to strike, but one of the things that I recommend is pick a number and just stick to it for a while. Say, I'm going to have 2 slots a month, and pull up an Excel spreadsheet or Word doc, whatever you want, and say, like, I have 2 January slots, 2 February slots, 2 March slots. And when you're talking to clients, I used to communicate this to clients and say, like, look, I'm only taking on 1 more client for next month. That's totally fine. It's not to pressure you. I just need you to understand when we'll be getting started. So if you don't let me know for a couple of weeks, that's fine, but it may be April or maybe May before we get started. It's actually a wonderful marketing technique or sales technique.
There's a secondary effect worth noting on this, which is, it sounds BS. I didn't believe it for a long time until I went through it. It's actually true. The more you push these people away and say, like, because we have capacity constraints and we can only onboard so many people, like I'm just not taking any new clients for the next 6 weeks, but I'm happy to work with you in April or October or whenever it is. They just want it more. There's a whole weird mental power play thing that goes on, that they have decided mentally to work with you, and then they find out that they can't because they got to wait because apparently you're so popular and cool that they didn't get to you first. And like, it just makes them want it more. And a lot of people push harder. I experienced this on the advisory side. At one point, I experienced this in our speaking business now, because I'm very particular about just limiting the total number of engagements that I take every year. And seriously, like the more I limited the number of engagements that I take, the longer my pipeline of engagements got, because it just makes a subset of people even more anxious to say, oh gosh, if the supply is that limited, I really want to make sure I'm the one that gets in, or that gets to work with this advisor. I wouldn't really tell anyone to like put these constraints in for that reason alone. I do know some sales classes that encourage this, like create the scarcity effect. It's sometimes called negative selling, and it does sort of work. I'm personally not a fan of it as like just doing it even though it's not really true, just because it creates perceived scarcity and then it makes people want to work with you more. If you want to mess with their heads a little, it probably works, but I don't like doing it personally. But if you just do it for real because you're trying to manage your capacity and your volume, it works. It actually does. You may be surprised how well it works, and that it just attracts them to you even more, which will just pressure you even more to be honest and true to that threshold number of just, Alan's absolutely right. Like, you just have to set a number and honor it, because the more your business grows, the more successful it gets, the more people are going to pressure that threshold, that target for you. And the harder it's actually going to get to honor the number. So for the sake of your sanity, like, you just have to draw a line in the sand and respect the line that you draw.
Yeah, it was really interesting when we were reviewing last year's data for XY Planning Network. What we noticed was we just have this sort of consistent growth. I mean, just month over month, it was just so consistent. And what we hypothesized is that at the time, we only had one person handling introductory sales calls. So that was Stacy. We've now added someone to her team, Lindsay, who is awesome. But we had Stacy doing all the calls. And so she could only do a certain number of calls a week. Therefore, only, and a percentage of those folks were a good fit, a percentage were not. So the percentage that were a good fit then joined. And in a way, we didn't do this intentionally, but like in a way, we probably had more prospective member calls that were trying to be scheduled than Stacy could handle. And so she was capped. And this is our example, this is our version of a 2 new clients a month is, X number of calls a month. Therefore, it's producing, bringing on this many members. And what you noticed though, was that like our team, if we bring on an average of, 20 clients a month or 20 new members a month for 240 members for the year, it is very different to do 20 per month versus 40 one month, 5 the next, 60 the next. That would just crush our team if we were trying to bring 60 new members on in 1 month. It's much better when it's consistent. And so because there's onboarding, there's ongoing maintenance, there's scheduling, future follow-ups and all the things that come in with it. It is so much nicer when you can sort of control your growth. It doesn't mean you're constraining your growth. You just want to control it. Because again, I would rather grow by 20 members a month than doing these like 60 and then 5 and then 60 and 5 swings for the same net number. So if you can sort of create a consistent growth plan, that is ideal. And I think you do that by saying, I'm going to work with 2 new clients a month. And there may be a month where you say, look, for whatever reason, the kids are in school and my significant other's going to be traveling, or I don't know, whatever's happening. And you say, I can take 3 this month, or, hey, it's the holidays, I only want to take on 1 in December. You can control that. You can do that. And it will let you structure your time so that you're spending the time that you need with each client and onboarding them, but you're also then spending time out there trying to fill the queue because you're now looking at, hey, I have 2 slots next month that aren't full. I need to go get some business. And it'll help you stay a couple months out on folks that you're onboarding. I think you'll find that will just significantly reduce the stress of business development, how much time to be spending marketing and doing sales and bringing on new clients and servicing clients. If you just sort of give yourself some artificial structure, and honestly, for a new firm, the number one place you're going to be spending time like this is on a new client onboarding. So if you restrict the number of new onboards, it's going to help you structure your time out.
No, The other thing I want to note to this as well, I mean, I know where this question comes from because I've been through this exact same stage in my business as well. I mean, the question ultimately comes from when you're finally getting going and some people are showing up and they're willing to hire you and they're willing to pay you after however many months or years of, just trying to get clients interested in you and being willing to hire you, right? You, as Alan, as you mentioned, there were a couple of lighthearted, sort of snarky comments in the thread about this of like, oh, I have too many clients coming in. Nice problem to have. It's not a position that all of us get to be in, but hopefully we get there at some point in the growth cycle and the stage of our careers. But the problem that happens is when you spent that long not having enough clients and being anxious about getting enough clients, it's really hard to retool your own mindset to, no, you have established a presence, you are understood in your community, they appreciate your value, and you have more people calling than you have capacity to do business with. And the gut response that you'll probably have, I know the gut response I had when I hit this stage in my career was, well, I'm going to make hay while the sun shines because who knows when that flow is going to stop. Like I spent years not having people just knocking on my door. Now I do. So hell, I'm going to make hay while the sun shines. I'm going to do as many of these as I can because who knows when the flow is going to stop. And, I'm all for prudent business management around, you'll have good months and bad months. So don't overcount your chickens before they hatch. But if your business is hitting this inflection point, the greatest risk to your business right now is not that the flow stops. The greatest risk to your business is that the flow continues. Because if it continues and you keep getting 3 a month, and then you start getting 4 some months, and you haven't built some kind of mechanism or system to control this flow, you will not be able to service your clients. Your service quality will decline. You'll start losing clients. You'll start losing sleep. You will make yourself way less happy than you were even when you didn't have clients. And you can blow up your whole business. There's a famous saying out there that more businesses die of indigestion than starvation. And it's this idea and this recognition that one of the biggest ways that businesses blow themselves up is not because they're eating well and then suddenly they don't have anything to eat. It's because they're eating well and then they try to eat more and they try to eat more and they try to eat more and they eat more than they can digest. And it kills them. And it can have really bad personal impact effects of your stress levels and your workload and your time in the business and your time away from family and your health and a lot of other stuff. And I went through a version of this and it was incredibly hard for me, I'll admit, to shift my mindset from the greatest risk is not what if this flow stops? The greatest risk is what if this flow continues or heaven forbid keeps going and gets higher. And so if you're at this point and you're seeing this transition, I can't emphasize enough, congratulations on your business for hitting this point where your organic business is flowing and, keep supporting the marketing channels that you've got that's making this happen. But that means you have to manage the flow, which means you have to put a cap on how many you're taking, because otherwise, at best, you're going to get into that feast and famine cycle. You'll take so many you can't sustain your marketing. Then 6 months from now, your pipeline will go to zero because you haven't done any marketing for 6 months. And then you'll have to get it going again. And by then, you're going to want to make up for all the 0 months. So then you're going to push yourself to have another round of 3 or 4 clients a month. And you're just going to go from being miserable in the feast to being miserable in the famine. The way you manage that is, in the truest sense, managing your growth. And managing your growth means setting real limits about how many people you can take and only taking that many people. And if your biggest problem is month after month, you say, I can only take 2 and you keep getting 3 and 4, and that's the problem that you have, you are not charging enough. So raise your fees.
Oh, I was going to say, go hire someone.
That's option 2. If I either start scaling your business by hiring people or raise your fees if you're planning on staying in a lifestyle practice. I know I guess we have some of each in XYPN. I think more of our members are just hoping to get to a good income in a lifestyle practice and not necessarily hiring a big team behind them. But yeah, like either you got to hire someone to help you handle all these, or you got to get ready for capping out, which means you got to raise your fees. Because if you're taking 2 a month, again, most advisors start capping out as they approach 75 clients. Maybe you can get to 100 with a paraplanner supporting you. If you were taking 2 a month, you are done for your career in 3 or 4 more years of growth. Even less if you've got some clients on board already. So like you may be done in 2 or 3 years at this rate. So are these really the clients you want to have for the next 10 or 20 years, the ones you're taking on right now? Because it's going to be really hard to replace them or fire them later. Or are you ready to start hiring and scaling up? Because the capacity wall is coming and you're going to hit it pretty quickly at this pace. So making some of those decisions about, congratulations, you've gotten past that really painful, miserable stage that a lot of us are in for a long time of just trying to get any clients to show up and get the business to come in. But if you're hitting that inflection point, one of the most destructive things you can do to your business is pretending you're still in that scarcity phase when the biggest risk is actually that you're not, and that the flow is going to continue. And that if you don't adjust your pricing, adjust your staffing, and manage your flow, you will be less happy with the growth than you were when you were just wishing the growth would show up.
Yeah. So a couple final points on that. I love the quote, and it's from the book Scaling Up, I believe, or it may be from somewhere else, where he says, more companies die of indigestion than starvation. I will say I've never actually seen statistics to prove that. So I've used that quote before. People are immediately like, "Where are the stats? Is that actually true?"
It was actually a famous saying originally from Dave Packard of Hewlett Packard. So
okay. Perfect. It is not statistically true. I can just go on a limb and take that guess. However, it is a very, very important thing to keep in mind in a business like financial planning that is service-based, very time-intensive service model, that you can absolutely blow your business up by growing too fast. So it's something to keep in mind. The second thing that I will add is that the advisor or the listener that asked this question, she wouldn't mind me saying her name, is Meg Bartelt, and she has a hyper-specific niche. So if you want to complain about that, that Meg gets too many clients that she can handle, well, it's because she has a super specific niche. She works with female executives in pre-IPO tech companies, for the most part in Seattle. That's really specific, and she's really freaking good at it.
And she's only a couple of years into her business.
Yeah, I mean, it is no surprise to me at all that she's dealing with excess growth and potential, and she'll tell you that in her first year she did not experience that. And if you're in your first year, again, don't compare yourself to other advisors till you've walked in their shoes. But if you are 4, 5, 6 years into the business and you're not hitting these points, I would take a look at all right, let's look at some of the advisors that are having this quote unquote problem, this good problem, but this problem nonetheless that Meg's experiencing, and ask, what are they doing right? And maybe how can I adjust? And I think what you may find is she's really clear on who she works with.
The niches thing really works. I mean, we saw it in the XYPN benchmarking study last year. I suspect we're only going to see it even more clearly this year, just because we had a lot of niche businesses that were, folks like Meg that were just hitting their stride last year. And last year's benchmarking study was actually, this stuff lags by a year. So last year's benchmarking study was based on 2016 data for a lot of advisors' businesses. The more these focus niches compound, the more you get these kinds of, air quote, problems of, it's a slow build for, frankly, any business, no matter how you do it, whether you've got a niche or not. But it's a lot easier to get traction in a niche. And once you start getting traction, the compounding starts.
So true. All right. Well, officially 4 questions. So we woefully failed in our attempt at getting through more. We apologize. We are looking at some other ways of being able to answer more of these questions. So if you have other ideas,
does that mean like you're considering just like a buzzer or a mute button for me, or like a clock that just goes after a certain number of minutes to stop me?
I have seen that clocks do not work for you either. No, if you have ideas for other formats or ways that you'd like to interact specifically with myself, but I'll include Michael in this as well. Always feel free to throw those ideas at us. We love the podcast. I think this is a way of being able to have awesome conversations and be able to share those conversations, because quite honestly, every single one of these episodes is a conversation that I was having anyway, so I might as well record it and let a bunch of other folks listen to it. But, we did that Ask Me Anything recently. Like I said, I got 45 questions, or 40 or 45 questions, which is awesome to be able to answer a lot of questions, even down to what's a great book that you read lately? And I love being able to answer those. So always open to finding ways to, being able to get to address more issues that are out there, because I know a lot of folks have great questions. So thank you, Michael, for taking the time, and thanks to all the listeners out there. We'll see you next time.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on again.
Missed calls or missed opportunities. Don't miss the chance to connect or bring on a new client. With Ruby, all your calls are answered live by a team of friendly, professional, remote receptionists, helping you win more clients and build trust. Let Ruby help you turn rings into relationships. For a special offer, visit callruby.com/XYPN and use promo code XYPN, or call them at 1-844-853-7829. Be sure to join our VIP community at xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to hang out with other XYPN radio listeners, ask questions for future mailbag episodes with myself and Kitces, and to finally find a community of like-minded financial advisors. Thanks so much for joining me today. We'll see you next time.
You're not alone, and you're not crazy. It's scary starting, building, and growing your own financial planning firm. And that's why we put together a free private community just for you, the Cutting Edge Financial Planner. Go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP or text XYPN Radio to 33344 and join a network of thousands ready to change the lives of Gen X and Gen Y clients.